Hello and welcome to Signals from the Hill. I'm Kat and I do marketing for Avery Hill Publishing. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to Clio Isadora about her book Sour Pickles, which came out in October. Sour Pickles is just one of the great books that Avery Hill published last year. You can head over to averyhillpublishing.com for more information. Our books are available from all good book and comic shops, and digital editions can be found on Gumroad. And now here's my chat with Clio. So I'm here with Clio Isadora. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Whose book Sour Pickles came out with Avery Hill in October, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a couple of months ago. So Clio, how do you describe the book when people sort of ask you about it?
I don't know. It's kind of a bit of a tricky one because I think it's quite hard and it's like quite a personal story to kind of like remove yourself and kind of give like a really short wording for it.
Yeah.
But I don't know, honestly.
Well, I think that the blurb says that it's semi-autobiographical. So it's kind of based on your life experiences, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it is like, obviously, yeah, it's a semi-autobiographical story about finishing art school, I guess is like the general thing.
Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to ask about how you got into comics in the first place. And if I can go by the sort of storyline of your book, it suggests that you were making comics as part of your degree course. Is that right? Were you making comics before, or did you start there?
No, I made comics before that, like in middle school and like high school, just for fun. Like were really like not very great, just like really biro scrolly, like emo kind of comics. And I grew up reading them. Like I had quite a lot of gothy comics and like read loads of manga. But kind of I kind of knew I wanted to do illustration, so I did a course that was like quite broad and had that in it. And yeah, I did like a comic for one of my final projects, which was fun. It was with like two other people, and then we made like a continuous story as like a 3-part story. But yeah, that was very different to how I kind of draw now, because that was like all hand painted and it looked like quite strange, I guess. But yeah, I kind of thought that was like quite a fun way of kind of going into it, because I always known I wanted to do comics and illustration, but it was kind of building like the skill set to kind of feel confident with being able to do it and just kind of play around with like image making.
So did you read comics as well when you were a child, or did you get into it a little bit later?
Yeah, I got into it a bit later. I'd say when I was like a teenager, I used to go to like Traveling Man and just like buy like Joan Vasquez comics and like just like bits of manga and stuff like that, and just have like a box at my parents' house of very like intense kind of comics I used to read.
So was your comic work sort of well received on your degree course? Because I hear stories where people have kind of they find themselves being talked out of making comics sometimes, or were they quite open to it?
Yeah, no, they were quite open to it. I just felt like the tutors probably weren't like the best for that kind of work, because I guess it's so broad of like what people want to do with illustration. So I kind of felt like a lot of the references they gave me were like really kind of entry level into kind of like indie comics. So they would say like Dan Clowes and stuff like that. But it's that thing of like when you're doing a project that goes on for a while and they keep saying to like use the same source material, but there's like obviously there's such like a broad spectrum of like people in like indie comics that is just a bit, you have to kind of source those references and try and find them, because it's just what I was kind of equipped with there wasn't as good as it could be, really. But I guess they're pretty encouraging of like doing your own thing and like self-publishing if that's something you wanted to do, but the tutors didn't really do that themselves. Right. So I guess like they did like their own kind of freelance like stuff, but it would have been really nice if it was like tutors that kind of were really actively interested in that kind of thing to kind of learn from, get a lot of knowledge from.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the portrayal of the university experience in your book, because it's kind of, I guess you could say, a little bit negative in some aspects. I don't know how to put it. Obviously, you kind of show some real positives, like the sort of friendships that can come out of that sort of situation, but also you're quite critical, I think, of some aspects of it. Is that quite true to your experience, the way it's portrayed in the book?
I guess so. I think it took me a while to kind of really think about what I thought of uni. I guess when you kind of leave it, you can look in hindsight. But it was like, for me, it was like quite a big shock because I guess I don't know how to describe it really. I guess it's that thing of like you grow up and you're with like people who are quite similar to you. And then university is kind of the time when you're kind of thrown into an environment where it's like, obviously it's really good to be with like people from loads of like different backgrounds. But I kind of felt like my kind of uni experience was like a lot of extreme wealth. So when you've kind of come from what I thought was like a really like normal kind of background, it kind of highlights a lot of things that you don't really have access to with like resources. So I think studying in London is kind of like that. So I wasn't expecting it to be kind of as intense for that, and just feeling a bit, I don't know how to describe it, not like alienated, because I think a lot of other people do kind of feel like that. But it was like good to like obviously like make friends and like find people who are like similar to you. But there was like quite a lot of jarring bits where like people just say stuff that's just completely like a different world from you. Just like, I don't know, like as an example, like in the book, there's like someone who, as a side project, was like launching a fashion line at the Bulgari Hotel. And like that was like a real thing. And just like, for me, that was like ridiculous because it's just like the idea of like you're finishing like your final year, but then somehow you have the resources and like time to launch a fashion line.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's just like stuff like that. Like obviously not everyone was like that, but there was like quite a lot of extreme wealth.
Was that your sort of route into, it's obviously quite an important aspect of Sour Pickles, that side of things, the sort of the financial economic side of sort of trying to be an artist. Was that your way into the story? Was that always something you wanted to highlight in the story, or did that sort of come to you once you started working on it?
Yeah, I guess because that was such like a big part of, I guess, my experience. And like I think I had like a lot of internalized shame of like where I came from, even though I shouldn't. But I think it's like when you're in those environments and you want to be like perceived like a certain way and not like, you know, just not like blend in, because you can't. But I don't know how to explain it. It's just like I was just around people where they had like a lot more things, and you kind of just like bury like a lot of what your real thoughts are just to kind of seem like the most digestible person of you, because you can't really be like that angry kind of jaded person at that point. But I think after, well, I kind of worked in art galleries for like about 6 years, and it continues on in those industries.
Yeah.
And I think I was just like really fed up, I think, of just like seeing like a lot of privilege and like a lot of access to things. And like obviously you think at some, I don't know if this is quite negative, like you think you kind of have the same opportunities as people, but you obviously kind of don't, depending. And I don't know, it's just like when you kind of go into something being a bit optimistic, and then you just kind of repeatedly see like similar patterns of stuff, and it's like, yeah, obviously it's like doable sometimes, but it's definitely working in the arts where there's like really low salaries, and then you realize that like you kind of have to have a background where you're able to afford to work in that. And when you don't, it's kind of like
Yeah.
I don't know. And like I think because I made like basically most of that comic during COVID, where that stuff was just basically really highlighted with like different people's kind of access, when it's like talking about like if you're in like crisis mode, I guess, of like, so for me, like I got made redundant from like my job at like Tate, and it was kind of interesting to see what people were able to do, I guess, when it's like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I was interested to hear that, because I think you mentioned that when in your social media takeover that you did for Avery Hill to promote the launch of the book. And I was kind of interested. The same thing happened to me. I was working for a big London arts venue, and I lost the job quite early on in the pandemic. I think we were on like furloughed for a little while, and then
that's what I heard.
It all just went wrong. So yeah, I was quite interested that you had a similar experience. For me, it was really sad because I'd worked there for so many years, like almost 20 years, and I had a lot of friendships that had gone on for a very long time, and also just sort of casual workplace friendships where you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if we know each other well enough to kind of stay friends now that this has come to an end. But but definitely a lot of the stuff you're talking about is very familiar to me from that job. There were times when we were trying to a bunch of us did some work with the union at one point, trying to get the London living wage for the workers. It was a big theatre in London. And, management being really resistant to that, but then kind of doing a sort of £80 million refurbishment of the building like a year later, and kind of thinking, well, it's hard to even see where that money went. It's just very strange.
Yeah, it's really hard not to be a bit jaded when you've worked in this role. Like, I don't know, I used to work at another gallery in like a front of house position. It was always that thing where they like say that they don't have enough money to like increase your pay, make it like London living wage and stuff like that. But then there's always money for other things. But I don't know. I think with me, with like the Tate stuff, I guess, like I kind of thought like my 2020 life at the very beginning, things are going the right way, because I got like a job that I really liked, and it kind of was like, seemed like it was naturally progressing that way. And then obviously with COVID, it kind of like plummeted down. It's like, oh no. And then it's like that whole industry was kind of, when you're kind of having to like apply for other jobs, you're just like looking at it and it's like there's hardly anything there. And they got like a massive government bailout, which they didn't really, obviously whatever they were prioritizing, they didn't prioritize it on like workers. And I was really involved with like the union as well during that time, and like went on strike and stuff like that. But it was kind of amazing, their handling of it, because it was so bad. Like I think they like email people that they were making them redundant, I think on the bank holiday weekend. And it's just
we had lots of similar stuff going on. I was in the lucky group in that I'd worked there so long I had a contract with the company, but the majority of the front of house staff were on casual contracts and 0 hours, and they were just kind of cut loose. And that those are the people that really were going to struggle to get something else sorted. At least I got a little bit of redundancy payment and stuff, but they don't tend to treat the workers very well in these places.
No, I mean, I was lucky I got like a redundancy payout, but that was through the union, because I was legally not entitled to it, because I didn't realize you have to work somewhere for like 2 years to be, I think, entitled to like the minimum one. But I think you basically had to like do something. Oh no, I don't know, I can't really remember it, but it was quite strange, because it wasn't really redundancy. I think it was them extending the furlough.
Right.
So technically I was like employed, but I wasn't. I don't know how to. Just very. I'm sure there was like a HR reason to that, but it was a very strange time.
Definitely a very bad time for people trying to make a living in the arts the last few years.
And it hasn't really recovered either.
No, nowhere near. So to go back to Sour Pickles, how did you sort of start that? What was the genesis of the book?
I think I kind of did it to prove that I could actually write like a long comic, because I've done loads of like short, like small ones that I like self-published that were kind of around like 28 pages max. So I just wanted to prove to myself I could actually carry out like a long story and just like develop my kind of narrative skills, because obviously when it's like 28 pages, it doesn't have to kind of convey like things that are kind of, well, they can, but I guess it's like trying to successfully convey a story in like a longer format. So it kind of started as that, and I kind of felt like the story itself was kind of like a nice way to kind of process a very strange time in my life and kind of feel like I'm done with that, and then just put it down, and then just kind of, I don't know how to describe it, just because it's a weird kind of chaotic time in my life that I kind of look back at it now, because there's been enough time, because obviously I think I graduated in like 2013, so I can like laugh at some things, but obviously when it's like closer to that point, it's like you can't really look at stuff with that much hindsight and be like
definitely. And at what point did Avery Hill get involved? Were you already working on it, or did they reach out to you to see if you had any projects you were kind of already started on?
So when I was in my like unemployed like kind of stage, I was basically just like, I've got all this time, so I'm just going to just like continue with this project, because I was kind of doing it before kind of COVID started, but I was just like posting it online. And then I think they got in touch, I think, when most of the draft stages were done. So I was like posting like full kind of inked pages of like the earlier bits of the story. So I guess you could probably kind of follow that it was like quite a big comic, or like for me at that point, because I think it's only like 80 something pages, but yeah, like I got like a message from Ricky, which was really nice, because I guess I'd met them before at like comic fairs. So I guess it was just seeing what the actual comic was, because then I had to obviously send like a PDF and kind of a bit more information on it, because I guess when you just post images with no text, it's kind of quite a bit vague, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So you were already posting some of it online. Have you found social media quite useful in terms of getting sort of work job opportunities and things for your self-published work and your freelance work?
I guess so. I think it's probably better actually doing like fairs. I find that like kind of more interesting, I guess, when it's like people actually see your work outside of like the like your phone.
Yeah.
But no, I have had like, I guess it's that thing, isn't it, where just more people see it if you put it out there, which is always good. And then obviously like applying for like fairs and like other events and stuff, it's nice to have like a visual kind of portfolio, or just like a sketchbook that's like really accessible. But I think, yeah, fairs are like probably the ones that I thought were kind of most interesting for like professional like development, I guess.
Yeah, I saw from your website that you've taken part in quite a lot of fairs, it seems like. What's your experience been? Mine's been very varied, depending on what kind of fair it was.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, totally. I tend to find that if it's like a comics like fair, that one is usually like really successful, because obviously people go in there to want to buy comics. I've done like illustration ones where I guess like people just buy like prints and like other bits and pieces. But I tend to want to do more comics ones, because then I can also buy loads of comics from people. So I don't know. It's quite strange, because I've done LCAF, and then that's like my favorite one. But then I did one in like New York. I can't remember what it's called, if it's like Comic Arts Brooklyn, I think.
Oh wow.
And that was really fun. And like it was quite fun, like to celeb spot like certain like comic artists that like I'd followed and just like loved for like ages. But that was more of like applying on a whim and not thinking I was gonna get it. And like just like a fun experience to see what it's like in the US, because I guess I've only ever done them in like, yeah, just really London. That's kind of the only places really where I've done them. But they're always like interesting to see who like the demographic is of certain fairs, and like what's kind of happening in that scene. But yeah, I do miss them, because it's like not really seeing that many like self-published stuff, and like it was always like really fun to kind of see other people's work, and like how like, I don't know, they've printed things. Just, yeah, because it's not that interesting with COVID just being in your room all the time seeing things digitally.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy that about attending fairs and just getting to talk to people about every aspect of the stuff that they make and how they print it and where, and yeah, it's really fun. I think I mentioned before we started recording that I did Thought Bubble this year, and I think everyone was just so happy to be there and to be able to do that again. It seemed to be really well run with the COVID stuff. Everyone was masked, and everyone seemed to comply with that quite well. But yeah, I think there was just this atmosphere of people were so excited to be able to kind of see each other again after such a long time. And yeah, that community feeling was really nice, I think.
Yeah, I really missed that. It must have been really nice to see loads of people that you haven't in like ages, and just browse and look at everything.
Yeah. Do you have others around the country that you want to try that you haven't done yet?
I'd like to do Thought Bubble. I've just like never applied, I guess. I guess when it's like, I don't know, the idea of like, I don't know, if, like, I guess fairs take a lot of time and like prepping, and I usually try and have like a new comic for each one. So I guess I was trying to work on a long comic and kind of focus on that instead of just like doing loads of fairs. but obviously with like COVID that kind of stopped anyway. But I think yeah, next year I kind of want to do that one and just see actually what's happening, I guess, because I don't really know, because I know some fairs probably aren't happening next year just because it's so up in the air and we don't really know.
Yeah, I guess we just have to wait and see.
I know. I just felt like, yeah, I was getting to like a good point of like, oh, I can combine going on holiday with doing like a fair and like kind of do stuff like that, because I'd like to do the like Toronto one. That would be like fun. But yeah, I don't think with COVID it's like booking a trip that's like,
Yeah, we might just have to wait a little bit longer, I think.
yeah,
That's the only one I've done outside of the UK is the TCAF Toronto
yeah.
one. And like you say, I found it so surreal to see people that I've followed their work online for so long just sitting across from me, being like, oh God, it's you. Yeah.
Yeah, as well, it's that thing of like postage now is like so expensive to get stuff from
Yeah.
like, yeah, Canada and like the US. So it's like if you get to go, obviously it's expensive to go there anyway, just like buy loads of stuff that like you wouldn't have to like, yeah, pay shipping on, which is nice.
Yeah. So yeah, to talk about your artwork style, is it a mixture of digital and traditional, or is it 100% digital?
I draw it all by hand
Oh,
with like felt tips.
okay.
Well, Sour Pickles is always like felt tips. I think I'm still trying to figure out what I feel is like the best medium,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like I used to use like brush pens, but then I felt like I couldn't really get that much detail in. So then I started using those ones to, or like felt tips to try and get more. But it's mostly just like ink in some format, and then I'll just scan it in and then like edit it like in
You
Photoshop.
you use some sort of textures and some sort of halftone type textures and
Yeah.
things. Is that something you add later in Photoshop?
I do loads of like there's I think in Sour Pickles there's a lot of like brush like smooshing.
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's actually with like a real brush. I don't think um yeah, I don't think I did that much like digital. Well, obviously the coloring, the like the colored kind of pages, that's all digital. Um, but yeah, it's mostly just like all the black and white is like all inked, and then if there's any like fun coloring, that's usually Photoshop. But I want
Right.
to get into actually just coloring with like paints and stuff and like pens,
Mm-hmm.
because I do like digital, but then it's that thing where you're always like in between. It's like I like the idea of having a really nice page that you've physically done, and
Yeah.
but then digital is really convenient, and you don't, I don't know, like you can obviously just easily erase stuff, whereas obviously when it's like with like wet materials, that you can't really do that so much unless you just
Yeah.
cover over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, I'm always like in between of like if I want to go fully digital, which is like would be like probably handier and cheaper, but then it's like I kind of like the traditional kind of format and just like the actual like full like just physically looking at a page and be like, oh, I spent that much time doing it. Whereas I don't know why with digital stuff I never feel like the time was actually spent. I don't know, I don't know how to describe it, because I guess when you edit it you just remove it, so you don't really see the whole process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit of a strange disconnect with digital work sometimes. I've really started to love working digitally just for all the convenience and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do miss not having a page of paper that I can look at. That's kind of, yeah, the major downside.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out, like what I prefer, but I'm always like envious of like people who are really like textual with like, yeah, paints and stuff with like making comics, but obviously that's really labor intensive. But
Yeah.
it's, yeah, I'm just trying to find like a happy place between that.
Yeah. And also you mentioned coloring, how I think I've seen lots of people comment that they love the coloring of Sour
Oh,
Pickles.
really?
Yeah. How do you, and you also sent me the zine, Is It Vague in Other Dimensions, which
Yeah.
was I think that was how Ricky had found your work originally or something.
Yeah, I think it
Which
was.
it's not quite the same, but it's kind of similar. How did you kind of arrive at that style of coloring?
I just really like pastels. I think that's like my favorite type of like color palette. So I guess it's I guess with Sour Pickles that's just more like, it's not like intention. I don't know how to describe like the coloring. It's just like blasts of color. It's not like done to kind of make it look realistic. It's kind of more like of a hazy kind
Mhm.
of, more of like an atmospheric type of coloring. But yeah, Is It Vague in Other Dimensions is kind of more like trying to build in like the world, I guess, with the coloring. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds quite vague. But yeah, I think that's like a stepping stone, I guess, because I guess it's like a similar palette, but that one is like kind of used more for actually like, yeah, building like the world in like a more I don't know. I'm like not very good at articulating myself with that.
I liked seeing the way you did it, because I feel like I'm really boring when it comes to coloring. Like I have quite a realistic approach to artwork, and it's kind of like if there's a sky, I fill it in with blue, and stuff like that, and all the discrete elements are kind of different colors. So I thought it was really interesting to see the way you did it, and you used a mixture of color and black and white as well for Sour Pickles. Where did that idea come from, and how did you decide, is it part of the storytelling, which parts are black and white and which parts are color?
I think it kind of initially started with like I was maybe going to do it black and white and then try and learn how to color things to make it look like more realistic. But like not like realistic, I don't know how to describe it. Like I don't know, I'm really envious of people who can color like properly with like where they know how like light falls on things to make it look more like not 3D, but like more
like
real. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like with depth and actually where the coloring adds like that to the illustrations. But I kind of, because I did at some point during Sour Pickles, I think when I started scanning it in, I got like a really intense job in like global marketing, so I kind of didn't have that much time to experiment and play around with coloring. So I thought it was probably more fun to kind of just make it as abstract, because I guess some of the story is kind of a bit in that vein anyway. So I thought it was kind of like a nice way to kind of highlight, say, like the kind of full pages, just to make it seem a bit more like, I don't know, not dreamy, but kind of a bit weird, I guess, because if it's not actually like colored in like a correct way. I don't know if there's a correct way, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
I would have loved to have had like loads of time to develop the coloring to make it look like more depth and like, I don't know, but I definitely feel like coloring is like a big aspect that I really need to work on for myself. I don't know, because I just do things in like black and white.
Well, black and white can be brilliant, and like I say, I've seen lots of positive sort of comments about the way that it's colored. So I think there's just this thing that every artist looks at people that do things differently to them and go, oh, maybe I should be doing it like that.
Yeah, I'm really guilty of that. Like there's so many like really amazing like comic artists, and it's just like I wish I could have that kind of thing, but obviously that's like years worth of their own development into image making. So I need to kind of look at that a bit, but they're all kind of going, I think, in that way, just like figuring out like a good way to color. But it also, I guess, depends on like the story completely, like what complements it and like what works with it.
And you mentioned the sort of the abstraction and stuff in your style. I really enjoyed that, and I think comics is almost the ideal medium to sort of write about things like drug experiences and things like that, because I feel like that abstraction can kind of lend itself to describing that sort of experience where other formats kind of struggle. Like having worked in this theatre for a long time, occasionally there were plays where there would be a scene where someone was under the influence of drugs, and it was always really embarrassing or cringy.
Oh, no.
I think it can be done in film quite well sometimes and things, but I just think there's something about having it drawn and being kind of stylized or abstracted that kind of it's almost the ideal way to try and tackle that subject matter. I don't know what you think.
No, I think that's true. I think it's easier because if it's like you're already like doing world building with how you draw, that like you have more control in how you can make the story kind of go. Obviously, if it's like stuff with drugs, you can kind of make it as like weird or as like representative as you can. But yeah, like TV and plays like really hard if it's like,
well, it's sort of an internal experience, isn't it? And when you're just looking at an actor kind of trying to convey that, it's quite hard. Whereas with artwork, I think you can maybe do a more interesting job of trying to show what that's like as an experience.
Yeah, I think comics and cartoons are really good for that. I think that's kind of why I go into that medium anyway, because it's just easier to be more expressive, I guess, with that kind of thing.
I really enjoyed the expressiveness of the faces of your
Really.
Is that something you've always been good at, sort of capturing facial expressions?
I think a lot of the expressions are quite pain. I don't know how to describe it. Like not like negative ones. It's kind of like wincing and stuff. But I think as a person, I'm very much like that. So I think that's probably why I like depicting people in that way. But I guess it's just I really enjoy drawing faces. And like obviously you can just make it look as ridiculous as possible, really, with like eyes and like mouths and stuff like that. But I guess it's like watching cartoons, I guess, like you kind of pick up that kind of, I don't know, you can kind of, I don't know how to describe it, I guess because they're so expressive, you kind of, if you just watch loads of stuff, you kind of like pick up ways of like how to communicate certain things. But yeah, I think there's a lot of like weird faces in it, but they're always fun to do.
Yeah, I love drawing faces.
Yeah.
I kind of hate trying to get characters consistency across long form stories. I really struggle with that, but I love drawing, moments of kind of where you're trying to express what's happening inside the person just by their facial expression. That's really fun. I think you're right, there's like a shorthand in animation sometimes where they do that really well, that you can kind of pick up on.
Yeah, that was also like a challenge though as well, when it's like you're doing a story with like certain characters that are going to be throughout it. So it's like trying to master drawing them repeatedly where they still look like themselves. But then obviously when it's like new expressions, it's like trying to figure out the best way where it kind of still looks like them in like a weird kind of, different face.
Yeah, it's really hard. I really struggle with it. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was because your zine, is it Vague in Other Dimensions? That's sort of quite autobiographical as well. Is that something you gravitate towards as opposed to sort of pure fiction?
Yeah, I don't know why I do. I think it's just like I find it maybe easier to do that because it's, I don't know how to describe it, I guess, with that. It's like I feel like if you made up your own story, that would take a very, very long time and like make it like really good. And I feel like I'm not that successful at doing stuff like that. But then I also kind of feel like there's some bits in life that are quite like bizarre. And I think with that one, Is It Big in Other Dimensions, I kind of I guess when it's like something that you're quite used to, because obviously it's about like my family and like growing up, and they're quite I don't know, like they believe in like conspiracy theories, and like they were like anti-vax and like believe in aliens, and like my mum believes in a lot of stuff which I don't really believe in at all. But it's that thing of like when other people react to me talking about it, then you're like, oh, maybe people find that interesting, or just I don't know. I guess it is like a very particular viewpoint. But I also thought it was when I released that, it was quite nice with other people reaching out to me who also had similar things. And I don't know, I always think that's nice because it's like you just want to, I don't know, if it is relatable to someone, that's good, especially if it's like a bizarre story. It's always nice when people reach out. I mean, even with like Sour Pickles, I've had quite a lot of really nice messages from people being like, I don't know, telling me that they like related to the story and it reminded them of their like time at university. So I always think that's nice when it's something people kind of have a connection to. But yeah, definitely the Is It Big in Other Dimensions, I mean, I kind of felt like some of it is just like kind of not like a joke, but just like when you kind of look back at things, it's like, you can kind of see like the comedy in like some of like the ridiculousness of like, I don't know, like how you were raised. I guess it's like at the time it's like my parents were against vaccines, so I didn't have vaccines. I had to like forge signatures, but now like they got like the COVID vaccine, which is good. But then it's just very strange to have been brought up in a certain way, and then you develop your own like personality and your own belief system, and then you kind of look at like, obviously it's the same with any parents, isn't it? But it's just when it's a bit more weird with aliens.
I think you did a great job in that of sort of approaching it with humor, so that it was potentially quite intense subject matter, but it was also really funny. And and you managed to kind of capture it in quite a short sort of comic. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm the same as you in that I just find autobio a really sort of obvious and easy way into telling stories. It just seems to be the natural way for me, and I agree. It's lovely when people reach out who've had similar experiences, and kind of that's a really nice aspect of it. Do you ever wrestle with that thing with autobio where you worry about writing about other people and including them in your work? It's such a tricky thing.
Yeah.
How do you sort of reconcile that?
It is. I think with like, is it big? The dimensions, I kind of did it where like I didn't necessarily like, I don't know how to say it. Like I kind of did it a bit light touch where it wasn't necessarily what I really think about things, but kind of just really matter of fact with like certain things and just like use that. But I guess with Sour Pickles, I was concerned about certain friends reading it and just like certain like people in my life. But then it kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those things where it's like my own experience. So they can't really, I don't know how to describe it. It's like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't know. It's that thing where it's like, if I was ever asked before that, I would say the same thing. But when no one's, I don't know. I tried not to, I don't know. Yeah, trying to like think for this because it's a bit of a tricky one. I kind of did it where I wouldn't, if someone directly asked me about something that was in it, I would have like a very good answer to like, that was very diplomatic about something, I guess, because it is your own experience, and like if someone's trying to convince you that it's not, that's kind of a bit strange.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I agree. You have a right to sort of write about your own experience, and if other people have, if other people's behavior has affected you, you have a right to write about that. As you say, it's just that's your experience, and if they have a different view of it, then that's fine. they could write their own story if they wanted.
Yeah. Also, I think like a way where, because I did have a lot of anxiety about it, because I initially was just going to self-publish the book, and obviously that's like a smaller audience, but obviously like for it to be published by Avery Hill, there's like more people would see it. I kind of felt a bit better about that stuff by thinking, well, nobody really knows the people in the book, so like they wouldn't even like put together who it was anyway, because it's just like no one in their like lives, and there's no one of particular like interest. It's just like a character in this, so there is like some distance of it anyway being released. But it's always strange because you never really know what people that you, because I feel more I don't know, I don't really like people that I actually hang out with a lot reading the stuff I've done, because I guess when it's that thing of like they like see, I don't know, like your real perspective of some things, and it's just like I'm not really, I think, that good at articulating certain feelings. So it's that thing of like when they see it in there, it's like
yeah, it's quite an awkward thing, but I think you just have to go with your gut feeling, and obviously there are some things that are maybe too personal that you wouldn't necessarily, you would think, okay, maybe I don't mention that or whatever, but you do have a right to kind of write about your experiences.
I kind of always feel weird when it's like people from work, where it's like you have a very like professional like face, and then with stuff like this they kind of realize how much of a chaotic person you are, and it's like there's some things you want to like keep a bit like to yourself, obviously.
I've had that thing of I did Inktober one year where I did a daily comic just from things that were happening day to day, and in one of those I wrote about a work colleague, and I was like, oh, she'll never see this, and then my boss kind of saw it and was like, oh, can I print it out and show it to her, I think she'll love it, and all of a sudden I was like, I was hoping no one would come across this. So it is quite strange when you think of that person is actually going to see it, not that I was writing anything horrible or anything, but
I know what you mean. It's always like you feel a bit on edge because you don't know how it will be perceived by that person, because it's that thing of like, if you don't intend for it to be a certain way, people can obviously react and feel like it's a bit, I don't know, if they get hurt, I don't know.
They might think you're taking the mickey, or
Yeah, I also feel like I don't draw people in in a flattering way. So whether they'll like see the drawing and be like, why am I like ugly?
Yeah.
Like something like that is like, is this really what you see of me? Even though it's like in a style and it was never, like supposed to look accurate to the people. Like I feel like some people would be like, why have you highlighted this about me? I don't know.
Yeah, I a couple of years ago I set up a Patreon, and I didn't really think about this aspect of it, but one thing I really like is that I can put stuff on there that a very small number of people can see, and it's quite nice. It feels kind of like having more freedom, because I just know that that very small group of people can read it, and it's a place where I can put stuff that's only semi-public, and I know who's going to see.
I feel more like that, like the older I get, with like, I guess with like who follows me on like Instagram, where it's like a lot of people from like professional areas of my life. And it's like, it would be nice to have some of it a bit private, or just, it's just people who follow you who don't know you in real life. I don't know. Or
Yeah.
like, not like anyone does or says anything about it, but it's just that freedom, isn't it? Just to be able to express yourself and not have like people that you see day to day being like a bit, I don't know. It's not even like I post anything like that weird, but it's that thing of like, it is just the freedom of like, you can just throw something out there and like no one knows you. I used to feel like that with like, yeah, like Tumblr. But yeah, I think because Instagram, there's so many people from real life, like family as well. But yeah.
So, and have your parents read all of your comics? How do they feel?
No.
No.
No, I kind of keep that very separate. I don't really tell them about that stuff. I don't know. I think it's different, because I think some people probably would like their parents to see it. I kind of want them not to see it. So I don't know. I don't, because I don't know how they'd react to certain things, even though if we had that conversation, it would be like, there is like a nice way to articulate it. But yeah, I just feel like maybe it would be perceived in a certain way. So I kind of, don't really.
Yeah, of course. And there's always odd factors that come into it. I remember talking to Elizabeth Querstret. I don't know if you know her work. She does lots of comics that are sort of based on her life. And she said at one point she'd written a comic about her brother, not really thinking about the fact that I think he's a teacher, primary school teacher or something, and that his students could come across that online and kind of laugh at him for the story that she was telling in this comic. So there's always these complex factors that come into how you decide what you can and can't sort of write about. But I guess you just have to kind of go with your gut, really, and say, if this is a story I really want to tell.
Yeah, I kind of wish if I could go back in time, would use like a different name that was like not as connected to me, as easy to find. Like some of my friends who've got like names for like their art practice, which is like not anything to do with that actual name. I kind of would love that freedom, but I can't really go back now. But like, yeah.
But I mean, it has its pros and cons as well, because then it's, I think when I first started freelance illustrating years and years ago, I initially went with a name that wasn't my name. And then I was kind of like, it's a lot easier to kind of brand this stuff when it's just me and it's obvious who it is. I don't know. It's a tricky thing, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to it. But I guess, I think with like autobio stuff, I mean, stuff that's quite personal, it's kind of nice to have like a boundary. But I don't know, I think it's like my actual name is like quite unusual. It's that thing where you're really easy to track, and I kind of don't really like that.
That's true.
Not like anyone would like bother doing that, but it's that thing of like, I just always feel slightly weird when it's like they could easily find you if they wanted.
Yeah. God, yeah, my name has a weird spelling as well.
That's it's like obviously you can't blame it on someone else.
It's that other Clio.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I just want to ask, are you working on any new projects in the sort of comics area? And what are you working on?
Yeah, I kind of want to make one that, well, I kind of planning it, something that was like very loose, I guess, in comparison to how I normally work, because as I mentioned, I kind of want to get better at coloring. So I kind of want to make one with a completely different approach to how I normally make comics, because I guess Sour Pickles was very like, the whole process of that was quite rigid for me. So I kind of want to experiment more in how I image make with like a story that's not really, don't know how to describe it. It's just like a short comic, I guess. That's a bit more experimental. But then I actually want to redo Is It Vague in Other Dimensions? Because I
Okay.
feel like how I've drawn in that, like I feel like I've changed a bit. So I kind of want to redo it and again play with different coloring for it, because I sold all of them and I kind of don't want to get them reprinted, because I don't know if you get this as well, where it's just like, oh, I did that years ago. I don't really
Yeah.
like how I've drawn that. I want to change it or something like that, and then just be like done with it. But I kind of want to yeah, kind of relook at that and just like redraw it, even though it probably sounds a bit like a bit of a waste of time. I think for me, I just want it at a point where I don't feel kind of a bit strange about it.
So if you did that, would you add anything sort of story-wise, or would it just be visually that you were changing it?
I don't know. It would be fun to add something to it, but then it's also, I don't know if it kind of changes the story, because there's like this bit that I want to add in that's like, I think my mum told me like a really bizarre story about spiders, I think when I was younger, and it's one of those things that like if I had repeated it maybe to other people, they would just think that's like a really weird, like not like, I don't know, just like a really, I don't want to say like bizarre, but it's just not really something that's like, I would say scientifically accurate, or it's, or I don't know if that's just me being like a bit negative and not opening my mind to other ideas, but like this thing of like spiders come from another dimension or something, and they're like from a time when people lived in trees and they came to this world by like a different frequency. So it's just like a weird story of like, I guess when I asked why do we have spiders, she gave this like quite intense story that like, yeah, I was like terrified of aliens, and this made it seem like there's like a whole universe of things where the spiders come from, and kind of ending it with like saying there is worse creatures than spiders. Yeah, so I was kind of thinking of maybe adding in something like that, but then I kind of don't know if that kind of changes the story of that one. I don't know, because I feel like it has 3 parts and it's kind of like they each one lead to another, but I guess I'll see.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I one thing I really liked about the 2 books that I've done with Avery Hill was being able to have an editor help me with stuff like that, because it's so great to have someone to ask and to go, what if I put this in, with what do you think? And those decisions are so hard to make when it's just you on your own.
Yeah, that's something I really, really benefited from, and it was like really nice to have someone else look at it and just be, because like I'm like really dyslexic, so I would like miss out words. I have like really bad spelling. So when someone else is looking at it being like, oh yeah, there's these mistakes, it's like nice to know that something's out there without any mistakes in that way. But yeah, definitely an editor is like super useful. But yeah, when it's like self-publishing, it's like you kind of only really rely on yourself for that, or like maybe you send it to a friend. But yeah, it's nice when it's like you've got multiple things out there that you know that there aren't any grammar issues or things missing.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you working on anything at the moment, or like future plans?
I'm trying to start on another book. I have hopefully what is a good idea, but it's just finding time at the moment, because with losing the job and now I'm juggling lots of little odd freelance, it just hustling really. I find like I've almost got less time than I had before to kind of work on it, but I just have to do it as and when I can, really.
Yeah, when I was unemployed, I had like a lot of guilt of what I spent my time on, because it's like obviously when you're doing like universal credits, like applying for loads of jobs and just like doing that and trying to do comics at the same time, but then feeling like, oh, maybe if I'm focusing on that, that's not productive. I don't know. But it's always with freelance, it's like very hard to have good boundaries, I feel.
It is, it's really hard. I definitely at one point made the decision to just have weekends like a normal person, and that was a really good decision for me. And you can still, if you're up against a crazy deadline, you can kind of break the rules a little bit, but it's important, I think, if you're freelancing, to kind of have a system and to say, no, I don't work on Saturday or whatever it is.
I know it's hard though, because it's like, I don't know if it's the same with you, but it's like I juggled a lot of my life making stuff by working full time. So then all your evenings and like weekends used to be like that. But now I'm at a point where I don't have the energy to do that, because I really need downtime, or like, I don't know, maybe it was easier to do when like you're younger. I don't know, but it's that thing of like, I'm quite lucky that I got like a new job that's like only 4 days a week. So I do, having even like a 3-day weekend's quite nice to get on with stuff. But it's like takes a lot of time to make comics, and it's like a lot of time by yourself as well, like trying to think about things and just like look at it. But
yeah, I mean, the theatre job was great for me because it was mostly evenings, and that meant that I could do my work during the day when I was kind of fresh and had energy, and then I could go and be a zombie doing my paid job. And now that I don't work evenings, trying to get everything done during normal work hours is harder than I kind of expected, but you just have to kind of try and work it out and set aside time where you're like, I'm definitely gonna spend a day on this today, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's like getting like a good routine. I think it's kind of hard when it's like your own project as well, because it's easy to like, I don't know, I find like working out composition of page takes like a really long time, and then you actually have to think about it and get easily distracted. So it's like actually putting in the hours.
I find myself kind of doing anything but working on my own project sometimes. I'm like, displacement activities, and maybe I'll do a bit of accounting today instead of actually drawing anything.
Kind of what I've done over Christmas. It's like everything but actually work on the projects that are actually comics related, because I took a bit of a break just because I felt like a bit burnt out, and then now I just like I should actually make stuff and make the most of this time. But there's always like, if it's like your own freelance stuff, just like finance admin, and just it's coming up to, it's super boring coming up to the tax. So I've just been doing that.
I think, like you say, you have to get a routine, or you have to be disciplined with yourself and say Friday is when I'm gonna spend the whole day on this, and then actually do it. I find that once I get into it, I'm more inclined to keep working on it. It's when I've had to take time off for other things and come back that I can struggle to get back into it a lot.
Definitely. I always find it with like drawing, and if you take like a break, you feel like it looks slightly different. Even though maybe to someone else it doesn't. But like I always feel like quite intense about those things. Like, it has to be all done in like one block or something, or even though it doesn't probably need to be. But like, I'd like to do like another comic that's like quite a long one, but it's finding in like a good block of time to figure out the story and all the compositions of all the pages and stuff like that, where it kind of seems like a like consistent story and doesn't just get like very strange at one point and then go back to normal. I don't know how to describe.
Right, it sounds really interesting. I don't know if you're the same as me, but I always prefer working on a comic once I've got through that first stage of planning it, and once I'm just making nice artwork. Because that planning, like you're describing, planning how the pages are going to work, I just find excruciatingly like hard work. And
I find that really hard.
Where the text's going to go to make sense, and kind of getting consistency, and then thinking, oh no, that I've got a consistency problem here because something doesn't work from the page before, and all that stuff is just but once I've kind of got a roughed out thing, and I can just sit down and put a film on and then draw or something, I really like that stage.
I love that stage. It's like when you've done all the penciling and you just do the inking, and you can just listen to an audiobook and just mindless and just like do that.
I love that. It's almost like autopilot. Although I've heard some comics people say that they really like the first stage because they like the problem solving and the putting it all together.
I mean, it would be nice. It would be nice if that was. I just always find like the compositions of like where to put people and like text, and like with Sour Pickles, I learned a lot about text with that, because like I had obviously only done comics like for self-published for like myself, so I didn't, obviously there's rules to text, and like obviously when it was like being edited, it was like, oh, you need to change this because that doesn't make sense with like this and this. But so that was really interesting to learn, because I just never had or never thought about that stuff. So I guess that's stuff to take on to the next project. Actually, there is rules like that, which I couldn't work out in the earlier stages, because I guess when I handed the draft, I'd already done like certain inking. So then having to like go back to it and like change it up so it actually makes sense is a bit like, it was needed, but it's that thing of like, if I'd known, I would have done that at a different stage. But I guess it's like the learning curve, isn't it, of like the first time you ever get someone looking at your work, who actually is an editor.
Yeah, it's a learning. There's just so much to kind of to juggle in your head when you're working on comics, especially if you're writing and the artist and everything on your own.
Yeah.
Even once you kind of have it all, you've got a bit of experience, you still I make so many silly mistakes. I was drawing a scene with a lot of people around a table, and I kept kind of moving the camera around them, so it was viewing it from different angles, and I kept getting like the wrong person sitting on the other side of that person, and then going, oh, hang on. And then I had to draw a map of where they were sitting, and then realize all the mistakes I'd made, and I was like, oh, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, when it's just crowds of people and the different angles, and you just kind of forget, or like.
Yeah, my first book, I kept doing things like, because I don't like working on the pages in chronological order because I get bored. So I just kind of pick pages that I feel like working on. But that led to a lot of problems with continuity, where I was like, this person's hairstyle changed and it's supposed to be the next day or the same day, and they're wearing a different outfit. Stupid things.
I feel like I definitely flipped some pages when I realized that some things weren't like a hairstyle's on a different angle or something. I just like had to mirror it or something, because it's I did that, where I did different sections of the book and then revisit it, and then saw all of these like small differences where it's like I have the opportunity to change it now, or just like live in regret. So
yeah, well, I really look forward to seeing what you do next, and thank you for talking to me. If people want to find your work, where can they look you up online?
I use Instagram most of the time, and it's Clio Isadora, just on Instagram as a handle. That's kind of it. I do have a website, but I don't really update that as much, and that's just like clioisadora.com.
Okay, great. I'll put the link underneath for people. Thanks again to Clio for talking with me, and thank you for listening.